On January 26th of this year, 2008, I heard the world premiere of the Kyle Gann piece for flute, clarinet, violin, and cello entitled Kierkegaard Walking. It premiered at On the Boards in Seattle, Washington. I was so excited about the piece that I wrote to the composer telling him about a published article I had on Kierkegaard Walking from the year 2001. And he liked it so much, I thought I would share it with you today. And also to encourage you, if you ever have an opportunity to hear the Kyle Gann piece, Kierkegaard Walking, you will take up the opportunity. He teaches at Bard College in New York and writes for the Village Voice. So, my article now on Kierkegaard Walking. Kierkegaard died in Copenhagen in 1855 at the age of 42. And he was notorious for walking the streets of Copenhagen and talking to strangers wherever he went. Because of his biting criticisms of Danish life, this habit puzzled his fellow citizens. They thought he would rather stay to himself, but he baffled them and he walked among them, talking hours on end. Kierkegaard knew this behavior was confusing, so he tried to explain it in both his published and unpublished writings. On the one hand, he said, he liked to walk because it was healthy. Walking every day myself into a state of well-being and walk away from every illness, I have walked myself into my best thoughts, he wrote in his journals. And I know of no thought so burdensome that one cannot walk away from it. By sitting still, and the more one sits still, the closer one comes to feeling ill. Health and salvation can only be found in motion. If one just keeps on walking, everything will be all right. Commenting on these words in the Lutheran Women Today magazine from January 2001, Kate Elliott wrote that if you're under stress about a decision, walking can help you gain clarity and well-being, and on a practical level, it can help you sleep better at night. Now, while it is true that walking can do this for us, Elliott misses Kierkegaard's basic point. For he goes on to say in that same journal entry from which Elliott quotes that such jaunts also run the risk of being intercepted by the suffering of others who stop to talk to you. When that happens, all is lost, Kierkegaard says. Confusion and agitation set in, peace of mind slips away. But Elliott ignores this complicating factor of interruption. It conflicts with the serenity she is peddling, as well as the anti-theological agenda of the magazine itself, Lutheran Women Today, which James Kittleston pointed out in his Lutheran Quarterly article from winter 1995. But in fairness to Kierkegaard, the risky part in walking should have been included. It fills out his overall point about well-being. It is supposed to include more than clarity of mind and a good night's rest. So I wrote to Lutheran Women's Today magazine about this mistake, and Beth McBride answered by saying that my correction did not meet their needs. Well, maybe so, but could it be that the truth of the matter might preempt McBride's assessment of what is needed? Kierkegaard thought pursuing the truth mattered even if it meant being stripped of the interior attire of our opinions. So what was the truth? Kierkegaard's reason for walking were not as simple as Elliott would have us believe. His contemporary George Brandes said that when he walked the streets of Copenhagen, Kierkegaard was as accessible to everyone as he was inaccessible in his home, just as profligate with his person here as he was protective of it elsewhere. Did this mean his walks were really insincere? Was he a misanthrope in disguise? Were his conversations phony and his walks a sheer hoax? Kierkegaard walked the streets chatting as he went in order to do more than get his exercise and put his mind at rest. He was trying to renounce himself by becoming so familiar that no one would expect him to be a profound thinker and give his publications the benefit of the doubt. No, he wanted to come off as a street corner loafer, an idler, so that if his ideas were to catch on, they would do so on their own without any benefit from that bestial flattery of the crowd, he wrote. By discrediting himself, he hoped to establish a pure ideal relationship between his writings and the world. He did not want his ideas enjoying the advantages ethereal esteem bestow. This renunciation also carried its fair share of pain. When he walked the streets, he was criticized and ridiculed for what he wrote. He said that was like being trampled to death by geese, or like being cast to the insects after first being smeared with honey, so to whet the insect's appetite. But he knew a Christian should not long for an effeminate life, snobbishly aloof in aristocratic circles. Christians should instead insist on getting out into the streets among men where there is danger and opposition, he wrote. Christians must not want to live cowardly and effeminately at a fashionable distance in select groups guarded by illusion. The Christian goal, after all, is to become a thorn in the eye of the world, he wrote. To forswear this danger would be to turn the Christian into a sissy swimmer, he wrote, the kind who does not want to go out into the water, a society of such swimmers who on dry land make each other believe that they are swimmers when they are only make-believe ones. So walking the streets of Copenhagen was important to Kierkegaard because it helped him clarify the Christian faith. He believed his rough and tumble times on the streets enabled him to illumine Christianity. On the streets, he learned how to starve the life out of all the illusions in which Christendom had run aground. Chief among those was that Christianity was being related to the natural man in the same way as horsemanship is related to the horse, as the trained horse to the untrained horse, where it is not a matter of taking away its nature, but of improving it. This mistake reduced Christianity, he thought, to an educational process. This illusion robbed Christianity of its radical cure. That cure is about crucifying the flesh, hating oneself, suffering for the doctrine, about weeping and wailing while the world rejoices, about the most heart-rending sufferings caused by hating father, mother, wife, one's own child, about being what Scripture says of Christ, being a worm and not a human being. Indeed, one who has taken this cure is no longer a human being in the ordinary sense. This Christianity illumined in the hurly-burly of the street is also where it should be preached. Preaching Christianity should not be done inside of churches, Kierkegaard wrote. It is extremely damaging for Christianity and presents a changing, a modifying of Christianity by placing it at an artistic distance from actuality instead of letting it be heard right in the middle of actuality, and precisely for the sake of conflict, of collision. For all this talk about quiet and quiet places and quiet hours as the proper element for the essentially Christian is upside down. Therefore, preaching should not be done in churches, but on the street, right in the middle of life. So when Kierkegaard walked the streets, he had something more in mind than exercise and a good night's rest. He was not vying to promote jogging suits. Nike, after all, is not likely to replace their famous swoosh with his profile, hat and all, to sell their merchandise. Woody Allen is closer to the truth. In reflecting some years later in Newsweek magazine in 1999 on his Oscar-winning movie Annie Hall, which premiered in 1977, he tells of a scene that he cut from the movie. It was a fantasy scene, he writes. We staged at Madison Square Garden with the then Knicks like Bill Bradley and Earl Monroe. We had the Knicks playing against 5 great philosophers. One was Kierkegaard. I remember. One was Nietzsche. Kierkegaard was a hunchback, so the actor who played him was either a hunchback or we made him one. And the thing that we were showing was the awkwardness of those great thinkers in real life and how graceless the cerebral act is compared to the beauty of physical acts. Thank you very much for listening to my article. If you're interested in learning more about me or Kierkegaard, I would advise that you go to our webpage, flcws.org, and check out Sermon 22. Also check out the prayers section for a section on Kierkegaard's prayers, and there's a tribute to him there as well. And check out the wedding section and learn about Kierkegaard's cure for divorce. Thank you again for listening.